There's a point where darkness isn't something outside, but something within, a place where the line between self and shadow blurs. Imagine standing on that edge, peering into an abyss that echoes back every whisper, every secret urge. Evil here isn't an action. It's an essence, a part of the fabric of existence. It's not born from intent, from choice. It simply is, coiling itself around our minds, a silent companion in our most private thoughts. What if the true terror of evil lies not in the act, but in the potential that lies dormant within each of us? Imagine every choice you've made unraveling, showing a path. You almost took a moment where darkness tugged, and you felt its weight. It's here that evil's seduction begins, not as a loud call, but as a quiet invitation, a reminder that we are all merely a step away from crossing an invisible line. In every era, society creates its own justifications, a set of moral rules that shift and bend with time. But beneath this veneer of right and wrong, there's an undercurrent, a raw, indifferent force that sees beyond human constructs. Evil thrives here, not bound by rules, indifferent to justice or guilt. Imagine this force not as a loud, chaotic monster, but as a silent undercurrent, waiting, watching, knowing that human nature will eventually meet it halfway. Evil is insidious, slowly blurring the line between necessity and cruelty, justification and atrocity. As Nietzsche warned, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. This reflection holds a mirror to countless leaders and ideologues throughout history. For instance, Stalin justified his brutal purges as a defense of socialism, framing them as necessary sacrifices for a grand vision. Yet, as history bears witness, these sacrifices were not noble but dehumanizing, spiraling into widespread terror that decimated millions of lives. Here, evil manifests as the justification of harm for a greater good, highlighting the fragile boundary between conviction and cruelty. It's in the quiet moments, in the split-second decisions, that the shadow of evil finds its footing. A fleeting thought, an impulse unchecked, a momentary sense of power. These aren't just coincidences. They are threads, weaving each person closer to a place where boundaries dissolve. Here, evil isn't a force to be fought or defeated. It's a mirror held to our deepest insecurities, our hidden desires, and ultimately, our fear of what lies beyond reason. There's a seduction to evil that defies reason. It beckons, not with promises of satisfaction, but with a glimpse into the forbidden, a space where consequences seem distant, and control feels absolute. This allure isn't just the thrill of transgression. It's the temptation to grasp what lies beyond morality itself. Imagine standing at the precipice of that freedom, knowing that in stepping forward, you abandon not just restraint, but your own humanity. History is filled with figures who crossed this line, leaving only ruin in their wake. They weren't compelled by rage or desperation alone. They were driven by an insatiable curiosity about the human limit, a need to answer the question, what am I capable of if nothing holds me back? This curiosity, buried deep within, whispers that moral boundaries are arbitrary, that goodness is a social construct to confine and control, and for those who listen, the descent into darkness becomes inevitable, a surrender, a merging with something greater and more terrible than the self. History is replete with individuals who believed their actions were justified, perhaps even virtuous, only to leave a legacy stained with suffering and destruction. Take Julius Caesar, whose ambition led him to cross the Rubicon, plunging Rome into civil war. Caesar's actions weren't driven by a desire to harm, but by a relentless pursuit of power, a reminder that ambition, left unchecked, can lead to devastating outcomes. His story serves as a cautionary tale of how easily the pursuit of greatness can morph into the path of ruin. Evil, then, is not merely an act, but a metamorphosis. It transforms the mind, reshaping every thought, every impulse. To embrace it is to shed one's skin, to feel each layer of humanity peel away until only the raw, unfiltered essence of desire remains. In this form, evil is not about harming others. It's about obliterating the self, a paradox where power and annihilation collide. To descend into the depths of evil is not a plunge, but a slow unraveling, an insidious slip into a world where every moral compass is shattered, leaving only the hollow echo of personal desire. The allure is not in the act of evil itself, but in the freedom. It whispers a freedom from guilt, from the weight of empathy, from the exhausting limitations imposed by society's fragile moral fabric. Here, in this shadowed realm, there is no judgment, only the silence of self-absorption, an intoxicating liberation from the chains that once bound every thought, every action. Imagine a place beyond remorse, a realm where consequences are illusions, fragments of a reality that holds no sway here. To those who embrace evil, this place is a sanctuary, a fortress that shields them from the world of light and law. They are no longer tethered to humanity, standing instead as watchers, indifferent to the cries of those still ensnared by their moral bonds. In this place, evil is not merely tolerated. It is exalted, seen as the ultimate act of self-realization, a rebellion against a universe that dares to confine what cannot be contained. This rebellion against moral restraint is no stranger to history. Consider those who walked among us as symbols of corruption, whose names are etched into the annals of infamy, not because they were uniquely monstrous, but because they allowed themselves to fully dissolve into their own darkness. They are reminders of how thin the veil truly is, of how close we all are to that same moral oblivion. For them, evil was not just a choice. It was a calling, a destiny that beckoned from within, leading them down a path few dare to tread. But what if that path is not as distant as we might hope? What if the line that separates us from them is not a barrier, but a mere suggestion, one easily crossed in the heat of anger, in the despair of isolation, or in the allure of absolute freedom? Here lies the horror of evil, not in its existence, but in its accessibility. It is a door that stands ajar, inviting anyone to step through, to abandon conscience for the promise of power, to trade compassion for control. And once that step is taken, once the door is crossed, there is no return. The descent is swift, unforgiving. One does not simply walk away from evil. It becomes part of the psyche, an indelible stain that colors every thought, every dream. It is the ultimate act of self-betrayal, a sacrifice of one's humanity for the seductive emptiness of pure, unrestrained desire. And in this sacrifice, the self is both destroyed and reborn, transformed into something unrecognizable, something monstrous. Evil, in its purest form, is not loud or chaotic. It is quiet, methodical, and relentless. It slips into the cracks of our lives, hidden beneath the guise of ambition, pride, or even love. It is the force that urges us to take just one more step, to sacrifice one more principle, convincing us that the ends will justify the means. But what evil never reveals is that there is no end, only an endless descent, a spiral where each compromise erodes the soul until nothing remains but the will to dominate, to possess, to consume. Those who tread this path seldom realize the transformation until it is too late. At first, they believe themselves unchanged, holding on to the illusion that they are still in control, still able to turn back. But as the darkness seeps deeper, it redefines them, warping their values, numbing their empathy. They become strangers to themselves, unable to recognize the hollow creature staring back at them in the mirror. It is here, in this internal exile, that the true horror of evil lies, not in the harm inflicted on others, but in the self-annihilation it demands. The world around them becomes a hunting ground, every interaction a test of power, every relationship a means to an end. Friends, lovers, family, they are no longer individuals with feelings or dreams. They are resources, obstacles, or tools. This perspective grants a dangerous clarity, a sharpened focus that allows them to manipulate, to lie, to destroy without hesitation. Empathy, compassion, these were weaknesses, vulnerabilities that only served to hold them back. Now, unburdened by such flaws, they see themselves as evolved, transcending the petty moralities that confine others. Yet this sense of superiority is a facade, a mask hiding the void within. For every soul that embraces evil loses something irreplaceable: their humanity. It is not a loss that can be measured or mourned, for they are often too far gone to notice, too consumed by the thrill of their newfound freedom. But in moments of silence, in the dead of night, when the world is still and there is no one left to conquer, a faint whisper surfaces, a reminder of the person they once were, a ghost haunting the shell of what they have become. And this ghost does not come in peace. It is a specter of regret, a silent judge that cannot be escaped. In its presence, they feel a chill, an unsettling awareness of what they have sacrificed. Yet, rather than turn back, they sink deeper, for to confront this specter would mean admitting defeat, acknowledging that their pursuit of power has left them empty. And so, they continue, each act of cruelty, each betrayal, a futile attempt to silence the ghost that lingers, reminding them of a humanity they can never reclaim. In the deepest recesses of the human psyche, evil is not merely an external force, but an internal war, a battle between our fleeting moments of kindness and the darker urges that simmer just below the surface. It is the temptation to exploit weakness, to revel in dominance, to stand above others and feel, if only for a moment, untouchable. For some, this struggle is lifelong, an unending tug of war between their better nature and the shadow that lurks within. But for those who surrender, who allow the darkness to eclipse the light, there is a transformation subtle at first, but undeniable. They begin to see the world through a new lens, one that refracts every interaction, every relationship, through a prism of gain and loss, power and submission. The richness of human connection becomes shallow, drained of authenticity. Love is a tool, kindness a strategy, empathy a weakness to be eradicated. In this view, humanity becomes a game, a series of moves designed to place them in a position of control, to satisfy an insatiable hunger that only deepens the more it is fed. This transformation is not without consequence, for in shedding their empathy, they also sever the threads that connect them to the world. Isolation becomes their companion, a cold comfort in the void they have carved for themselves. They are adrift, detached from the warmth of human experience, surrounded by people yet utterly alone. And it is here, in this solitude, that the true weight of their choices begins to press upon them. In moments of quiet, they may glimpse the enormity of the loss they have incurred, a loss not of possessions or status, but of the self. But rather than confront this emptiness, they often double down, plunging deeper into the darkness. They tell themselves that compassion is weakness, that empathy is a burden, convincing themselves that their isolation is a mark of strength. And yet, deep down, they know the truth that they are haunted, hollow, a shell of who they once were. This is the price of embracing evil, the destruction of the very qualities that make us human, leaving only a barren wasteland where once there was life. And so, they carry on, driven not by purpose, but by the hollow echo of desires that can never be fulfilled. Every conquest, every act of cruelty, every betrayal serves only to deepen the chasm within them. They are addicts, feeding a hunger that can never be sated, chasing a satisfaction that forever slips through their fingers. They may rise to positions of power, amass wealth, and wield influence, yet none of it can fill the void they have created. They are prisoners of their own making, trapped in a cycle of endless craving and inevitable disappointment. The journey into darkness is a gradual erosion, a series of small compromises that seem inconsequential at first. Each choice, each action, feels justified, even necessary. It begins with a whisper, a quiet rationalization that what they are doing isn't wrong, just practical. After all, they tell themselves, everyone else would do the same if given the chance. But with each step, they lose a piece of themselves, a sliver of conscience that fades into the shadows, leaving behind only the cold logic of survival and ambition. This descent is marked not by grand acts of cruelty, but by an accumulation of smaller betrayals of trust, of value, of self. They convince themselves they are still good, still capable of kindness, even as their actions paint a darker picture. The shadow within grows, fed by each compromise, until it becomes indistinguishable from who they are. And in that moment, They cross a threshold, becoming something unrecognizable, something that no longer resembles the person they once were. In the world they now inhabit, morality is a relic, an outdated concept for the naive and the weak. To them, strength is found in shedding these limitations, in embracing a version of themselves that is free from guilt, from empathy, from the burdens of conscience. They believe they have evolved, transcended the petty concerns of right and wrong. But in reality, they have regressed, stripped themselves of the very qualities that elevate humanity beyond mere survival. They are no longer complex beings with rich inner lives. They are hollow, driven solely by impulse and self-interest. This hollow existence is not without cost. As they cut ties with their own humanity, they also sever the connections that once gave their life meaning. Relationships become transactional, devoid of genuine emotion or connection. Friendships, once cherished, are now means to an end, stepping stones to be used and discarded. Love, if it still exists, is a twisted echo of its former self, warped by manipulation and control. They may not recognize it, but they are alone, isolated in a prison of their own making, unable to bridge the gap between themselves and others. And in this isolation, the true horror of their choices comes into focus. They have gained power, perhaps even wealth and status, but they have lost something far more valuable: the ability to truly connect, to experience life in all its richness and depth. They are spectators, watching from a distance as others laugh, love, and live. They tell themselves they are superior, that they have outgrown the need for such trivial things. But deep down, in the quiet moments when they are alone with their thoughts, a sense of emptiness gnaws at them, a reminder of what they have sacrificed. They tell themselves they have won, that they have achieved what others could only dream of. But in the end, what they have gained is an illusion, a fleeting sense of power that crumbles when faced with the void they have created within themselves. The things they thought would bring satisfaction, control, dominance, wealth are empty rewards, incapable of filling the silence that has taken root in their soul. And so, they are left, standing alone at the peak of their own making, surrounded by the ruins of the lives they have manipulated, the people they have used. The thrill that once came from holding power over others fades, replaced by a gnawing sense of futility. They are haunted by the echoes of those they betrayed, by the memories of the person they once were, a person who could feel, who could love, who could be vulnerable without fear. In the end, evil is not a force that comes from outside, but a reflection of the darkest parts of ourselves, the parts we try to hide, to suppress, to deny. It is the desire to control, to consume, to take without giving back. It is the willingness to destroy others to feed our own emptiness. And in the end, it is the destruction of the self, the annihilation of everything that makes us human. For those who embrace this path, there is no redemption, no escape. They are trapped in a prison of their own making, condemned to an eternity of isolation and regret. They have sacrificed their humanity for the fleeting illusion of power, only to find themselves empty, hollow, and alone. And in the end, that is the true nature of evil, not a force to be feared, but a choice, a decision to abandon the light and embrace the darkness. As they stand at the edge, looking into the abyss they have created, they realize that the final act of evil is not something they do to others, but something they have done to themselves. They have become their own worst enemy, their own captor, their own destroyer. And in that moment, they understand the true price of their choices, the loss of their own soul.